to the banking and financial industry is being reshaped by data, automation, and real-time analytics.
With digitalization, we have more opportunities for large digital platforms to help SMEs. Can the public sector work through these digital platforms in offering support to some of the smaller producers who are in difficulty? Are there, co-sponsored loans, for example? Can we structure things a little better, given that there is so much data available to these platforms? That's one example of how you can use the new digitalization to offer support in more targeted ways.
The new industrial strategy we are developing is about how to make sure that our local companies have easy access to the superhighways in cyberspace. If we don't create channels that make it easy for our firms to get on to Amazon Marketplace, to Apple and to Microsoft apps, and to Google and to Facebook, you might as well quarantine your economy's future.
This is the end of the big office. Everybody is going to work in a distributed environment, all work off their screens. What makes us human beings and what makes us social creatures, not just for innovation and ideation, but just as a way of living, that's not going to disappear anytime soon. But I do think technology will make a more and more fundamental difference to the way things get done.
Companies have to step up to a new role in the wake of the pandemic. I think clearly companies need to think of themselves as global citizens, that we are part of our communities.
Unlike, for example, Europe or the UK, we're not seeing a top-down regulatory mandate. This is commercially driven. And there's some really interesting use cases emerging that are solving pretty fundamental problems with fintech infrastructure or financial services infrastructure in the region. And we're seeing, we're seeing the first wave of banks and fintechs that are publishing and consuming these open API products. And we're starting to see the very beginnings of a next generation of products like account opening, loan origination, and some more value-added open APIs.
How can we use this moment to reimagine a more inclusive digital economy? One that brings the benefits of the internet to everyone. The answer is twofold. First, by accelerating progress in closing the digital divide, which means expanding connectivity, financial inclusion, and digital skills. Second, by deepening partnerships between governments and business, which means building on the new collaborations we have seen during COVID.
Financial services have always been leading technology adopters. And I think coming out of this crisis, I think there's going to be more of an acceleration. There's going to be a fair amount of disruption, but there is also going to be blending of, even on the regulatory side, I think, Bill, what I'm seeing is these arbitrage opportunities will go away, and all of what needs to happen from a financial services perspective will happen, and will happen with speed, with technology.
Because fintech business is not like the other businesses. It is fundamentally a broker of trust. And also when we studied the history of finance, we realized that there are two things that's actually imbalanced. One is the revenue or profit actually precedes the risk. A lot of time, a financial company make the money first, and then the risk came out later. And the second nature of the business is that a lot of time, profit or revenue is grabbed within a commercial organization, but the risk is actually borne by the society.
I wouldn't talk only about financial education, but I would talk about financial and digital education. This thing needs to be brought together as we see more and more services that are going to be given to people, offered to people through platforms. I think that the combination of the two is going to be pivotal in order to avoid a polarization of in the globe between people with access to good digital networks and good financial information.
We're trying to get more money in the hands of women through investing for earning more at work. And we're trying to really bust through the old myths of women and money don't belong together. A key to economic growth is getting more money in the hands of women.
Within a 10-year time frame, we're looking at getting, to really 2/3 of everyone should have financial access.
We are going to be so digital in our lives. Every action we take will create a digital footprint, digital byproduct. And therefore, how that is, where it is, how it's put to use, how do I benefit from it, all that, those are very, how data is handled is really one of the profound questions of this century.
Privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world, right? And that privacy by design construct is indeed highly desirable in a payment system. Secrecy is not necessarily highly desirable in a payment system for some very obvious reasons, but privacy certainly is. And so, cash is anonymous, not necessarily because the central bank had a remit to deliver an anonymous medium of exchange. It was literally the only way to do it.
Singapore and a few other countries, including Cambodia, Kenya, and a couple of other countries, tried to come together and try to set up a guideline on standardization. So when each country built their own global stack, we try to make sure that there's an open API where when we need eventually to do any cross-border, whether it's for trade purposes, whether it's for merchant payment, we can connect this together.
We're right on the cusp of what I like to think of as like the broadband moment for digital currency. And most major fintechs that touch hundreds of millions of users are adding support for this in the next year or two. And that's going to really light this up on a global stage.
Stablecoins may compete against both commercial and central bank money. Take the example of cross-border payments, where improvement is badly needed. Even though stablecoins do not offer the same guarantees in terms of credit risk, liquidity, service continuity, and neutrality. This sense of urgency should prompt us all to collective action now.
One of my really favorite cypherpunk slogans is transparency for the powerful and privacy for the weak. Right? So, and if just individuals with their personal lives, like that is something that should not just be transparent. It should be something that people have the ability to keep to themselves. But things like these big mechanisms and these big institutions and systems that kind of govern how society operates, and transparency there, and transparency around what the rules are, transparency to provide a guarantee that the rules actually are being followed correctly, and all of those things. And they're definitely, I think, very important and powerful ways to just make sure that people have confidence that the system works.
I think this decade is going to be the decade of AI. And in that context, I have seen so many amazing ideas, so many amazing companies get started where people are collecting large amounts of data, analyzing it to be able to predict patterns so we can get out of the guessing game.
Also, we're dealing with models which are a lot more complex than traditionally the models that we've dealt with. And so I think model interpretability is really important. It's really important to devote resources to model interpretability, rather than just going out and developing more and more complex models.
Effectively, who controls data, controls everything, and effectively who can deliver a very good insight from their data is really in charge of the digital future.
A private sector-led coalition in Singapore has identified an opportunity to develop an Asian voluntary carbon credit market at large scale. The Sustainability Alliance for Action, set up under the Ministry of Trade and Industry's Emerging Stronger Task Force, has proposed developing a market ecosystem for voluntary carbon credits. Such an ecosystem can facilitate price discovery, improve liquidity, and verify the integrity of carbon credits. MAS is pleased to announce we will be embarking on Project Greenprint, a technology platform aimed at promoting a green financial ecosystem. Project Greenprint aims to strengthen 3 key elements in that ecosystem. 1. Mobilize capital. 2. Monitor commitment. And 3. Measure impact.
Many of the most efficient, cheapest, best, and most impactful from a biodiversity perspective as well, nature-based solutions and carbon offsets will be found in developing economies. It gives a huge incentive, if we structure this market correctly, it gives a huge incentive for them to invest in nature-based solutions.
Hindu-Kush Himalaya region, sometimes called the third pole because of the vast amount of ice present here, asset for food, energy, water, carbon, and cultural and biological diversity. 1.9 billion, which is a very significant number actually. It is 1/4 of the total global population, which is quite significant. So what happens here in terms of climate and environmental change is very important.
If I have a dream, that is, if the World Bank can issue retail green bond to global millennials, and I say, okay, the bond denomination is $1,000 or $10 equivalent, and I sell to 100 million global millennials, the Generation X, that's $100 billion. That is a huge potential we have not tapped.
We looked at the flows into conservation globally, and then we looked at all of the different financing mechanisms for financing nature and case studies. So we really drilled down, and we came up with a big number of financing that was needed to address this problem. It was $800 billion annually. Now that used to just sound just huge to me, but looking at the $4 trillion in fiscal stimulus we've had in the U.S., it doesn't seem quite as large today. But the point that I emphasize to people when I'm talking about this is a lot can be done without any new money. It just comes down to government policies.
We fundamentally believe that there's a tremendous runway for growth in Asia, given the under-penetration of financial services here. So, we continue to be extremely focused on investing meaningful amount of capital in Asia.
And the last and the most important thing for our audience here is the shift of economic growth to emerging markets led by Asia. We are going to drive the incremental GDP of the world in the next 20 years. So that is a big trend for us not to forget and make sure that we can go out and support the entrepreneurs there.
The idea is not to push the SME towards technology, but educate them that using technology will not only help them, of course, improve their own business productivity, but maybe get financing at a much better rate. Everything you have to give to me is digital.
For SMEs who were earlier unfunded or underfunded due to lack of collateral. So going forward, their digital identity and their digital footprint will act in a big way as a collateral.
We looked at everybody on the planet that has APAC, Asia Pacific, or Asia in their job title. It's part of their job title, head of APAC, whatever. Turns out 29-30% of those people on the planet sit in Singapore. That's fascinating. So we conclude from that Singapore has, in essence, become the capital of Asia from a business perspective. And moreover, that the opportunity is in Singapore to create broader businesses, not just Southeast Asia, but particularly from a tech perspective, seeing that many pan-Asia Pacific decision makers in Singapore suggests that the next wave is going to be enterprise software.
You get sort of digitization to be a big part of traditional industries. You also have to look at how to secure it. So the underlyings of smart enterprise, and in particular in this case, cybersecurity, will be critically important.
The financial sector in general needs to understand that they can trust these global trends of development. They can invest into companies which for them become actually far less tangible. Company in the future looks more like a high number of product teams put together from people from various services markets, from people from various parts of the world, and the product, the industrial product, the good, is only one part of this project team. But this is the enterprise of the future, the green enterprise for the future.
Companies everywhere, East and West, are finally looking at the data and seeing that when their employees are stressed out and anxious, it affects productivity. That's the paradox of productivity that's being recognized now, that it's not enough to optimize workflow processes and provide great tech safety protocols. We need to also address the stress levels of our employees.
When I talk about stakeholder capitalism, it is also about making sure that you are representative in the communities where you work. To be local and to be connected in the community where you work.
The holistic reform of labor markets, technology, consumption, along with retirement is needed for better retirement solutions, because it's about, as Elsa, if she were here, would have said, making labor markets flexible to employ the 65, 70-year-olds along with the 20-somethings is what a winning strategy would be for retirement.
The relationship between myself and my co-founders was actually pretty toxic.
I've always said that my biggest mistake was to not raise 1 year sooner half the money with a single investor.
We did a lot with the team that we had rather than hiring at perhaps the speed we had originally planned as we'd come into the year, and that obviously created additional pressure on the existing team to sort of be delivering all of that, but with very, very limited resources.
Many investors will look at it and say, look, if your business is down 30%, why not you try to cut your costs 20-30%? That's actually not the right way, because there will be an upswing coming on. And if you do not invest, continue to stay invested today, you start to really hibernate your effort, your technology, your sales force. And when the opportunity comes along, the next wave comes, you will not be there.